I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to amend our agenda at this time and add our Parks and Recreational gentleman's name to do a commission report on the Railroad Avenue, and his name is Mark Ziegler. And so I think, Mark, what we want to do is go ahead and start it off with you first. Is that okay? I called you a gentleman, I think.
I think that's appropriate. Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Today I'm pleased to introduce Paul Fussell with Studio KPG. Studio KPG was the consultant that the city contracted with for the Railroad Avenue corridor study. This was born out of the downtown visioning and the road diet project over a year ago now. So this gives us the city a little more information on what possibilities are, specifically with Railroad Avenue from 1st to 10th, and then, 1st to 12th, 12th to 101, around Evergreen Square, and then around Tollie, the post office, and Post Office Park. So I'll hand it over to Paul at this point, and he's got a little presentation for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Hello, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm going to run through a summary tonight of what the study included. It was an exercise to look at the corridor from essentially the park and ride site all the way to Front Street from both a multimodal point of view and any enhancements that can help in the the continued revitalization of downtown. The project goals, like I just mentioned, was to review multimodal and downtown enhancements. It was to really build upon the community vision and action plan, so we didn't want to repeat any steps there. It was to look at both future concepts and short-term projects, and I'll speak to those as we go along. And then the grant from the Washington State Department of Commerce Business Services Division was also about looking at potential infrastructure projects. The 4 areas of focus, as Mark mentioned, is in this diagram. This is a sheet out of the study. Section of Railroad Avenue is from US 101 and the Park and Ride to 12th, and then from 12th to Front Street is essentially the Downtown Action Plan. The little red rectangle is Evergreen Square, and the purple rectangle is Post Office Park and Tollie. So the first section, taking us from the Park and Ride on the other side of 101 to 12th, was an exercise of trying to figure out, with limited right-of-way, how can we do some multimodal improvement. So I want to go through some of the things we looked at. There was also actually a layer of additional items. We looked at wayfinding along US 101. We looked at a gateway designed for Deegan for visitors getting off the road and then being oriented to Shelton and downtown Shelton. Then the pedestrian and bicycle facilities, and then we also did look at the spur line from a multimodal point of view. What we discovered, and everybody kind of knows this within the community, is that when you're passing up 101 from north or south, there are 3 exits that are miles ahead of the actual entrances. And what we recognized in this bottom left image, the laser pointer won't show it, is that there is a city center sign that has a white line, and underneath that Matlock. And it isn't quite apparent that city center means Shelton. Now, the US DOT has, in multiple places, city center plus the name of the community. So we did a little graphic on the bottom right-hand corner of this slide that says City Center Shelton. And we think that would really help in terms of understanding that you're heading to the downtown Shelton. Another thing that we looked at is once you get off the off-ramp and you head up Railroad Avenue to town, that there's a little information kiosk that's been out there for about 20 years or so. And that is right next to Deegan Road. And that is a great candidate for a potential gateway sign. This is county, it's outside the city limits, but it's within the
UJ?
Exactly. And so at some point, this will probably be captured by the community, so why not capture at least with a gateway sign? And for the sake of the study exercise, we wanted to build upon the 3rd Street gateway and then just explore other kinds of possibilities as a long-term project, or it could be short-term, that the community might look at a means to figure out what a gateway design might be. So we just have some graphics there. There are no designs yet, but just concepts to work with. So now we're going to talk about the ped bicycle facilities along this stretch. Right here at the creek at Goldsboro, it's obvious that there's no sidewalk facilities or bicycle facilities. The actual bridge structure has about 42 inches of concrete kind of sidewalk on the backside of the guardrail, but there's no sidewalks leading to it. So essentially there's no facilities here. And this is the pinch point along the corridor. The right-of-way widens out towards US 101, but a lot of the stretch of the roadway is only 40 feet of right-of-way, particularly along the spur line. So it's a very limited amount of area that currently could be improved without having to go get easements on either private property or along the spur line. So actually, I go back. The dilemma with the bridge is to get bicycle facilities and sidewalks is that it would require widening the bridge, which would be a big fiscal impact. So for the sake of this study, we tried to keep it within realm of feasibility, and this is a county section, it's not the city section. So when we looked at the big picture with the group, we realized that the spur line, well, first the park and ride is the ideal place to connect. So from a multimodal point of view, people could, if you can get on their bikes to that location to and from, certainly it's a park and ride lot, but we want to connect all those modes, that we could take a look at the spur line as one possibility. We know right now it's potentially activated for use, and that would be a great use for that corridor. If that wasn't to happen, at least theoretically, the study says that is also a possibility. And really, the connection along the spur line is to connect along 101 to have a separated bicycle facility for users and not put them on Railroad Avenue. So we're not saying it's the best way to go, but from a feasibility of cost, it might be long-term a way to go. So this picture points out the existing utility poles. There's driveways along Railroad Avenue. Most of the land use is on the south and east, but there are some on the north and the west. I've only seen a few pedestrians in my minimal number of trips to the community. I saw a mom with a stroller out there. There is a need for people to walk along the corridor, but there's really no facilities with the meandering shoulders that are out there. So we thought, well, what could we fit in here with 40 feet of right-of-way? And one thing that became obvious is potential of a 6-foot sidewalk, in this case on the south side, that connects most of the land uses that are bringing people towards Railroad Avenue, people coming up their drives and driveways. And then for the sake of kind of a big picture, long-term vision, doing something if the rail line becomes available 5 or 10 years from now. Working with the county, they're very open to adding minimal bicycle or pedestrian facilities. The bicycle facilities are hard because if you add those, and let's see, even a sidewalk on the other side, your cross section's wider than the 40 feet, because you also have to have the utility poles within that space. So for the sake of the study, we tried to keep it really minimal in terms of improvements. And so they support this, and there's actually enough room to not even move the poles to get in a 6-foot sidewalk. There's 2 cross sections here. The top is showing existing conditions. The travel lanes are 10 to 12 feet wide on how they're striped in the county portion. And right now the rail line isn't active, but the potential of it being activated we consider to be a good possibility. In terms of long-term plan, if that ever becomes available, again, you could have a shared use, multi-use path for both pedestrians and bicyclists. And that would be used from anybody who wanted to commute to anybody just visiting for a weekend in Shelton and want to just get out on their bikes to and from. You could do a whole thing with having bikes available for visitors or people coming off the bus with their bikes, whatever kind of scenario. And then the sidewalk along the south side is what this section's showing. There, and then the trail on the north side. I should back up and mention that there would be potential stormwater improvements that need to happen. You'd probably put curb and gutter where the sidewalk is to have some differentiation. So there are some civil engineering improvements that would need to happen. All right, now the next section is from 12th to Front Street. And again, we wanted to build on the downtown action plan. And we're also going to then also talk about Evergreen Square and Post Office Park and Tollie. So the number one thing we would have recommended, and that's also one of the recommendations of the vision plan, is the road diet. So the city's successfully just restriped Railroad Avenue, and it works just fine. 4 lanes to 3 lanes still carries about the same amount of traffic, and it's much safer for pedestrians to cross. You now have additional bike lane space, so it's really a win-win-win for downtown. It would be our number one thing for any downtown improvement, and that's what our focus is with our company. On-street parking was looked at in the initial phase around angle parking, and that was not considered a viable option. The parallel parking is available. That works great. Crosswalks are demarcated in a nice colored painted area, so those are very strong crosswalks now for pedestrians and for vehicles coming down the corridor that they know there could be pedestrians there. We'll look at enhancements around Evergreen Square and Post Office Park in relationship to community activities. So I hadn't realized that it was fully striped when I did the slideshow. I was showing you before, and I wish I had the after picture, but I don't. I'm going to skip on that from 2 lanes to 3 lanes, and these are the images that were used to actually do the striping. So after driving it both directions and walking along it, I would deem it a full success. This image was just to show that if you wanted to create a variation to the asphalt out there, there is different in-pavement imprints that could be done. They're still flush for parades and things like that. So you already have the color. It's just if you want to texturize it. So now back to Railroad Avenue and a little bit of history. So in 1927, when the spur line was active and the roundhouses in the backdrop of the picture and the rail lines moving up and down the corridor, Railroad Avenue is a one-sided main street. All the buildings were all on the south side of the road. The north side, any of those buildings that were commercial were way far back and probably facing the next street over. What that caught our attention looking at the picture is it in a lot of the spaces block by block have these open areas because that's where the rail line was. And that could be considered potential in terms of long-term vision, opportunities to create a wider promenade since you have that space. And when we look at Evergreen Square and Post Office Park, we got some ideas around that. And then, of course, this picture also shows when Tollie's being parked, this wide space that's been infilled little by little. The purple stripe in this image, again, is just showing from a plan view, and the center image is right where Evergreen Square is, that there is this space available. Just to the west is the bank, and of course that space is not available because that newer building encroached within that area. But from block to block, you might have these opportunities. Evergreen Square is a public parking lot. Is pretty much right now just used for parking. And in these downtown cores for revitalization and for community activities, you really look for flexible space. And this is a fantastic candidate for making it more of a flexible space. And one of the things we've seen in other places is taking a parking lot and making it look different than a parking lot, let it function as a parking lot until you have an activity where you get the cars off of it and then you hold other activities. And before I show you pictures of that, I do want to point out that, the sidewalks aren't continuous along there, and that those improvements would be a nice improvement. Maybe some of that parking could go away along the west side is a concept, and that the center part of the parking lot, either as asphalt or some other improvement of concrete, could still be striped as a parking lot, but have a different kind of larger plaza feel. So these are two examples that we found that are in the study. The one on the left is in downtown Redmond. It's a newer parking lot that was painted by an artist, and you can see it on Google Earth if you Google it. The Redmond Central Connector. That's primarily used as a parking lot, but they do hold civic activities here when they do things within the park where they need a hardscape. The other image is Shoreline's Farmers Market that is by the Sears site off Aurora Avenue. And they have this beautiful logo that they're painting over a series of summers with the community. And the logo is actually being painted right on the parking lot, but the parking stripes are still there. So when they don't have the farmers market, people are parking there. So conceptually, that could be a short-term or a long-term kind of project for Evergreen. The other aspect of it is to take a look at downtown parking, and if along this stretch, because the clock tower is actually a focal point in downtown. It's been a place where the community has been celebrating different and memorializing different events. And if some of that on-street parking came off, that we could create more of a wider sidewalk zone in the concept of that promenade that could then extend over into the parking lot area. And it could be either a raised sidewalk or it could be flush, whatever condition, that could allow for more civic activities right in the heart of downtown, right in the front yard, so that everybody sees these activities and it just gets everybody that much more engaged. Post Office Park in Tollie. When we looked at Post Office Park, between the gazebo and the Christmas tree, it's pretty hard to do any improvements to what is a fantastic celebration. So we didn't really have too many recommendations about the actual park space. But when we're looking at Railroad Avenue and trying to, again, increase Tollie's presence on the corridor and space for visitors and communities, or citizens to gather, that space is at a premium along there. So I'm going to show you some pictures. First, the concept with Post Office Park is to take the existing green area, and if we took off a few more of those parking stalls, which I know are all heavily used for the post office, perhaps we can get another connection with a little bit more green that takes the park and brings it right up to Railroad Avenue. And then some of that parallel parking that's along Tollie, if that was removed, we'd have that much more space for a wider promenade sidewalk. And what really is obvious is when you're standing out there and you realize you're pinched between the parking and Tollie, and that there really is a need when there's, families and other gatherings just to have a little bit more room. And, in this case, the FedEx is even kind of blocking what is, one of the key pieces of sculpture in downtown, a kid favorite. So this particular image just kind of shows that if you took the on-street parking off, you would almost double your sidewalk side there. And there's still lots and lots of parking between Evergreen Square and the parking in the Post Office Park and the surrounding. And then this image is trying to show how we could bring green across the corner. It's not showing the sidewalk connection that we'd put in. Crossing it from the park over to this area, you could even do a little raised crosswalk there and just keep traffic really minimal as they're going through the post office, and really trying to extend the park feel right up to Railroad Avenue. So my number one bullet's done. Implement next phase of road diet, it's been done. So that was kind of the short-term project that would have been most important for the corridor. The next would be to coordinate with the county about sidewalk improvements at the very least, just to have some pedestrian facilities that people could get to. For those folks who are on the north and the west side of the corridor, we'd have to figure out where crosswalks could take them over, so we could have some safe crossings. That's important. The spur line and its potential activation, if things don't work with that, then it would be maybe acquiring a portion of that for potential rail to trail. Develop a gateway design at Deegan Road would really be an enhancement to Railroad Avenue in the downtown. Coordinate with WashDOT for the wayfinding signage would be a pretty easy early win to get those signs changed. And then working with the community on development, some variety of enhancements to the sidewalk spaces and the parking lot use at Evergreen Square, and also Post Office Park in Tollie. So really everything that the study is bringing forward is in support of the action plan and trying to find pretty easy wins, short-term and long-term, that really help benefit Railroad Avenue and the community. So any questions?
Any questions?
Now, I would just, did you look at the width of the rail corridor? Because it was my understanding that if we were able to negotiate for a portion of that, we may be able to accomplish the widening of the street as well as the sidewalks with an active rail there.
I think that's possible. It's a much wider right-of-way than the 40 feet that the street has. And the only thing that would be considered from an engineering, they're on two different grades, so there would have to be a cost around the grade issue with walls and stuff. But I would think spatially you could make that work. We didn't quite dive in that deep around that, but I think that's a real possibility. And we did a similar thing in downtown Snoqualmie. We have a walkway that's right next to an active rail line that's being used.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your report. Give us something to look at.
You're welcome.
Very
Thank you
nice.
so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
All right, next is our weekly commission reports, and so I'll turn to Commissioner Moore and see what she has on the agenda.
This week I will be attending the Association of Washington Cities Conference, and that will take up most of my week.
Commissioner Moore, Commissioner McDowell.
Okay. And I too will be attending the AWC conference in Vancouver this week. Leaving tomorrow, we'll be back on Friday.
And I, three, will also be attending that conference along with our city manager. And it's a great place to network and also look into what other cities are doing to accomplish some of the goals that we are endeavoring to do. And maybe we find out some different ways to do things. So we're looking forward to being educated this week. That concludes our weekly commission reports. And next is general public comment. We have a 3-minute time frame, and we welcome comments from the public. So do you have anybody signed in?
We do. Randy Lewis.
All right.
Hey everybody, Randy Lewis. First of all, let me be clear. I have always said I support privatization of the garbage function. What I do not support is a specific deal with Mason County garbage. Just because it has been discussed for months does not mean it is not a bad deal. 3 businessmen were referenced. I would like to know, did they only support privatization of the garbage function, or did they also say that they approved of this specific deal? The garbage ratepayers have been saddled with unacceptable risk. In order to meet an arbitrary deadline, the garbage ratepayers now have to live with a 20-year albatross around their necks. The city should have opened up renegotiations instead of signing an awful deal. This is not a well. It's not as if the city would have run out of water on July 1st. Unless, of course, you're a garbage ratepayer who has his water shut off. This was promoted as the best business decision for the city of Shelton. Yes, good for the city government, bad for the garbage ratepayers. I would love to run a business where I have a monopoly, where the customers are forced to buy the product from a specific vendor, whether they need it or not, and I get to deprive the customers of water, not because they're piling up garbage, but because they didn't pay a bill. The news release says that the deal will be limiting potential rate increases through 2037. The city claims the deal will provide stable rates. On the contrary, there's a CPI clause in years 11 to 20 with unlimited upside. Apparently, city staff not only knows that future CPI increases will be limited, they also know what CPI volatility will be in the next 20 years. Not even the most brilliant financial forecasters would make these claims. Last week, 5- and 10-year contracts were discussed. Why was the original 10-year renegotiation clause removed? The comparison is not between what the city would have charged versus what it will cost Mason County Garbage to provide the service. The comparison is against what Mason County Garbage will be allowed to charge, not what it will cost them. The contract provisions have nothing to do with Mason County Garbage expected expenses, but instead everything to do with funding a kickback. Utility tax. Should garbage ratepayers be required to pay a 26% or greater higher rate to give kickbacks to a city government that will have little or no role in providing the garbage service? The value of the garbage franchise belongs to the citizens, not to the city government. Suppose the city says that it will abandon all the kickbacks in exchange for a methodology that will provide for lower rates. Do not tell me that these were the lowest rates that could have been achieved. I do not believe that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, next is we're going to recess out of our regular meeting and into a public hearing. In this public hearing, we're going to hear a resolution, and it's going to be presented to us by our Public Works Director, Craig Gregory.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, as we have been discussing for quite some time, is the privatization of the solid waste utility. And one of the final steps in that process is to liquidate the assets of the solid waste department, which requires a public hearing per RCW 35-94-040. And that is what we are here today to discuss. And I would feel free to answer any questions that you do have on the liquidation of assets.
Questions or comments for Craig Gregory?
No,
No.
I don't.
This is a, what do you call an action item? It is something that we allow the public testimony. And if so, anybody else has anything to add, this would be the opportunity. Is anybody signed in for public testimony on this matter? Okay, seeing none, at this point, completing our questions or comments, and there were none. I'm going to close this public hearing and return to our regular session. And at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I move to adopt the resolution number 1102-0617 to declare the solid waste utility assets surplus and approve the sale of this equipment.
Is there a second? I will second it. Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Thank you. Next, we have a reading of our consent agenda, and so are we prepared for a reading of our consent agenda?
Yes.
Could we please have that?
Consent agenda. Vouchers numbered 91 through 227 and 14659 through 14680 in the amount of $630,720.31. Voucher numbered 14691 in the amount of $9,579.37. Vouchers numbered 14699 through 14774 in the amount of $233,037.84. Approval of minutes from the study session of May 22nd, 2017, and the study session of May 30th, 2017.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as read.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All right. There's a motion and a second. All those in, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? All right, we are now into the action agenda portion of our meeting. And item number, it looks like first item under G, and that would be concerning another resolution, and that will be presented to us by our associate engineer, Logan Brady.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This is regarding the 6-year tip that we've discussed over the last several weeks. Unless there's any further questions, we just ask that we adopt the 6-year TIP so that we can submit it to the DOT.
I'm in favor of doing that. So I think what we want to do now is to see if there's any other further questions or comments for Logan about this 6-year
I have
program.
none.
No.
Okay, so I guess we need a motion to approve this.
I move that we approve resolution number 1100-0517, adopting the 6-year transportation improvement program for the years 2018 through 2023.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear that.
I
There's a
second.
motion and a second, and any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much. And it looks like next we are going to also be hearing from Logan Brady on the C Street landfill change order. And so would you like to talk to us about that?
Absolutely. Aspect Consulting, who is doing the remedial investigation work of C Street at the landfill, they have submitted a contract change order. So to give you a brief update, they drafted a remedial investigation feasibility study work plan that was approved by the DOE. The approval from the DOE came with some work that needed to be done. This change order is asking for $81,221 to complete that work. This is not an additional $81,000. This is still within the original contract amount of $250,000. At this time, we are just asking that we approve the contract change order and authorize the work to get going.
Okay, any questions or comments concerning this item? I will say that it is encouraging to see us moving forward on something that is something that I believe the public wants us to do, and that's to take care of the C Street landfill issue. I like in here where it says, city staff is currently working with the Department of Ecology to secure additional funding for this project and the next biennium. And so hopefully we can continue forward and see a closing of that issue in our lifetime. So is there any other questions concerning the C Street landfill? Okay, so I guess I would accept the motion at this time.
I move to approve the contract change number 2 with Aspect Consulting for the remedial investigation of the C Street landfill.
I second that motion.
There you go. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Brady. Item number 3 is an amendment and to the Gray and Osborne Alder Street design contract, and our Public Works Director, Craig Gregory, is going to talk to us about that.
Thank you again, Mayor, Commissioners.
Just, excuse me, I'm going to backtrack a little. There is public comment through any of these actions, so if you want to speak from the public, make sure you sign up, and that's been in our information beforehand. I'm just reminding somebody on these specific items, it is open to the public comment. You may continue.
So a week ago, we brought forward a proposal to do a 10% design for a project on Alder Street from 1st Street up to either 7th or 8th Street, depending on what we were actually looking at there. And after we got done with the meeting last Monday, we had a kickoff meeting that we scheduled on Tuesday to discuss that project. And within that, we started looking at a larger project that would include the walkway from 7th Street all the way up to C Street, up by Skip Horse at the top of the hill. And we have recently had some issues with that multi-use path coming down the hill. We actually had an accident there a couple years ago that we looked at, and recently, more recently, we've had a sinkhole that has created a larger issue for us there. So we started looking at that project as something more expanded throughout the downtown core and then all the way up onto the top of the hill. And with the TIB being a fairly healthy program at this point, we looked at that and said, do we expand this and enhance the original thought of the project that we had, or it could actually be a separate project that could get funded alone if we don't end up with a funding source for Alder Street. I'm not saying that TIB would be the only funding source that we would look at, but to move forward with any funding, we would have to do a 10% design for that walkway, which would be a new concrete sidewalk that would lead all the way up to the top of the hill and remove the Jersey barriers that are there now, and do a stand-up curb to direct traffic and keep them off of that sidewalk. So we are looking to amend the original contract that we had with Gray and Osborne to increase it by a little more than $16,000, and we feel the best funding for that from the city would be to use the traffic impact fees to do that 10% design for that walkway or multi-use path up to from 7th to the top of the hill at C Street. And right now, the traffic impact fee fund has a little more than $277,000 in it. So there is plenty of money there to do this design to get ready to go out for application for funding.
Questions or comments?
I'm completely in favor of this. I think it's very, very necessary. I think it would be a good project to continue the work that we're planning to do down along Alder. And I love the idea of getting rid of the Jersey barriers. One thing that I would like to look at when we go a little bit further, I think a good addition to this project, or a good addition in conjunction with this, would be if we could get one of the crossing flashers up across from Skipper's, because that's kind of a dangerous area to cross, and I know a lot of people do cross there. So, but I'm totally in favor of this.
We could certainly take a look at that, and that would be something after we get done with that 10% design that we could look at something further as far as moving pedestrians back and forth across Olympic Highway North.
Great, thank you.
Sounds good.
Was this project also part of the maybe advantage of doing this project now? Is this somehow that we tied in with maybe the Basin 3 work in that area or anything? Did I hear that, or was that a different issue?
It could be tied in with right on the heels of Basin 3. Timing would be fabulous if we could make that happen. I'm not sure that that is going to happen, but that would be best case scenario.
Well, I think this is a good thing, and so I think we all agree to that. And I want to ask the public if they had anything to add, and I don't see anybody signed in. So at this point, I guess you're just requesting a motion to amend this contract, and so I would entertain that motion at this time.
I move to amend the contract with Gray and Osborne Incorporated to include a funding application level design of the multi-use path on Olympic Highway North from North 7th Street to C Street.
Just a point of clarification on it says 7th Street to C Street on one of my papers. It says 8th to C Street on another one. The yellow copy has an 8th, and I'm not being nitpicky, it's just my eyes caught that, so.
Okay, yeah, just.
Point of clarification on that.
And Mayor, it is, we have talked about going either to 7th Street, depending on the funding and what kind of project we put together for Alder. We've also talked about at some point also going to 8th and including an MTA bus pullout at 8th Street and a sidewalk improvement on that side, on the north side of the road. So we're not sure if it's going to 7th or 8th at this point until we get a little further down the road and see where that Alder Street project might stop, and then the multi-use would actually kick in.
Okay. So for the point of this motion, do you want us to use the 7th Street to C Street, or do you want us to add 8th Street?
We would like to use 7th Street at this point, just in case that doesn't end up being an enhancement to the Alder Street project. that it maybe gets funded alone, and it's a standalone project, and we wouldn't be going from 8th Street up the hill. It would extend all the way down to the intersection at 7th.
All right,
So we would be asking to go to 7th at this point.
very good. Sorry to
Thank
interrupt the
you.
motion. It seems like that is the correct motion. Did you get it completely?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so we have a motion, and is there a second?
I second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second, and is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. There is no business agenda at this time, but there is the possibility of an administration report, so I'll turn the meeting over to our city manager to see what he's got in his folder, or docket.
I'll take it. Thanks, Mayor and Commissioners. Two things. First, I wanted to mention that we originally planned to have the permitting discussion tonight. We pushed that back a little bit, so next week we'll have that discussion in a briefing setting. That way we can gather a little more information. And then also wanted to give you an update that we're trying to finalize or update the school resource officer, the SRO contract with Shelton School District. It's something that's, we've had a good understanding of that work relationship, but we figured that we should update it and solidify that contract and bring back some more information in the near future. But it's an agreement that for us has been very successful. And when I say us, I mean the partnership between the city and the school. So in brief, that's a position that we are able to use for student counseling. Also some staff consultation. District also works out some safety enhancements with Paul Campbell, who's a current SRO. So these can be from as much as dealing with kids that are having issues in school to also addressing suspicious behaviors at high school or the huff and puff, and also dealing with ramifications of when people come down to the district office. So that's a position that's been very successful, and we hope to get this agreement finalized. We happen to have the same attorney, so she's working to make sure that both sides are represented and also make sure that we can get an agreement done in place for next school year.
All right, yes,
Oh, when Ryan's finished, I had
That's
something
it.
to add.
looks like he's done.
Okay, I just had two things that seem to be really timely. I just wanted to give a brief update as far as the pursuing reuse of the Simpson Rail Corridor. And just so people know, that project is not dead. We're still working on that. Negotiations are still happening and looking good at this point. So that's a positive thing. Also, we are gathering information to present regarding the change of the potential change of our form of government from commission to council, and we will be getting more information out soon. Oh, and I'm getting a call.
Is that
Sorry.
your phone?
Yeah, no, it's not me. No. It's my daughter. Sorry. But that was it. I just wanted to mention those two things.
Okay, so you said we're looking into this, so you put a request into our city manager to find out about that. And so you're looking into it. You said we're looking into it, so you're looking into it.
Well, and with staff's help, yes.
Yeah, just make it clear. Okay, and so is there anything else?
That's it, Brian.
Okay, our next meeting will be Monday, June 26th at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. This meeting is adjourned. All right. 45.